The fluorescent lights hummed a monotonous tune above me, a fitting soundtrack to the sterile office. It was my usual Wednesday evening counseling session. I, Laura, a 44-year-old writer wrestling with a persistent case of writer's block and a general malaise, sat opposite Dr. Evans. He was, as always, impeccably dressed, his expression carefully neutral. I fidgeted with the corner of a loose thread on my cardigan, the silence stretching uncomfortably between us. I'd been meaning to talk about the recurring nightmares, the ones where I'm drowning in ink, suffocated by the very words I should be crafting. But tonight, something else took precedence. "Doctor," I began, my voice a little shaky, "I think I'm falling for you." Dr. Evans' carefully constructed composure wavered only slightly. His eyebrows rose fractionally, a barely perceptible movement. He leaned forward, his expression one of professional concern, exactly the look I'd come to expect from him over the past 6 months. This wasn't unexpected, not really. The transference thing, it's in all the textbooks. I'd read enough about it in self-help books to recognize the symptoms. I knew rationally this was inappropriate. He was my counselor, a professional bound by ethics and confidentiality. I'd even briefly considered addressing it earlier, but the idea had felt too overwhelming, too embarrassing. Now the words were out, hanging awkwardly in the air between us, thick and heavy like the scent of disinfectant. Dr. Evans cleared his throat, the sound crisp and precise. "Laura," he said, his voice calm and measured, "this is a common occurrence in therapy. It's something we can explore further, and I want to assure you I value our professional relationship and will not act on any personal feelings. We'll need to focus on addressing this, perhaps using techniques like reframing and cognitive behavioral therapy. Our next session will be dedicated to unpacking this dynamic, but let's schedule an extra session for next week to give us sufficient time. The important thing now is that you understand this is something we can work through together." He was right, of course. It was something to work through. And somehow, even though it felt absurd, a small sliver of relief pierced the awkwardness. The session continued, but now, the looming anxieties were shifted slightly, replaced by a focused determination to navigate this unexpected complication of therapy. Yes, it was. And this time, I was ready to take it. The train ride home felt longer than usual. The clatter of metal on the tracks rattled through my head, mirroring the turbulence of my thoughts. I stared out of the window, the blurred city lights smearing across the glass like oil paint. Falling for your therapist. How cliché. I knew it wasn't love, not really. It was projection, attachment, a misplaced desire for connection. And yet, my heart had betrayed my mind. The logic didn't matter when emotions surged in unpredictable, uncontrollable waves. At home, I poured myself a glass of red wine and settled onto the couch. The television played something in the background, but I wasn't paying attention. Instead, I found myself fixated on the pattern of my own thoughts. What was it about Dr. Evans? His presence? His understanding? Or was it just that he was the only person in my life who listened, truly listened, without judgment? The realization unsettled me. I had friends, didn't I? Colleagues, acquaintances. But none of them really saw me the way he did. Or maybe, I just convinced myself that was true. I scrolled through my phone, half-heartedly opening a blank document meant for my novel. The cursor blinked at me accusingly. I hadn't written anything worthwhile in months. Maybe Dr. Evans was right. This wasn't about him. It was about me. And something deeper, something unresolved. I shut my laptop and picked up my phone, hesitating before typing out an email. "Dr. Evans, I'd like to take you up on that extra session. Please let me know when you're available." The reply came faster than I expected. "Of course, Laura. Let's schedule for Friday at 6 p.m. I'll see you then." 2 days. I could wait 2 days. The additional session came, but instead of relief, it left me feeling more exposed than ever. Dr. Evans dissected my emotions like a scientist with a scalpel, probing at the origins of my attraction with careful precision. You mentioned feeling stuck in your writing, he noted. How do you think that correlates with these emotions? I swallowed, uncomfortable. I don't know. Maybe because I feel like I'm failing? And you're not. Dr. Evans didn't react immediately. Do you feel like you've failed in other areas of your life? I bristled. I mean, doesn't everyone? A small, knowing smile. That's avoidance, Laura. I exhaled sharply. Fine. Yes. I feel like I failed at love. At marriage. At my career. I used to think I had it all figured out, and now I just feel like I'm walking in circles, pretending to be someone I used to be. His gaze remained steady. And in this space, you don't have to pretend. My throat tightened. Yeah. The session continued, but I left feeling raw. If my feelings for him weren't real, they certainly felt real. And wasn't that the same thing? The sessions blurred together in the following weeks, a steady push and pull between clarity and confusion. I was learning to separate my emotions from reality, but the boundaries were shifting in dangerous ways. I started thinking about Dr. Evans outside of therapy, wondering what he was like beyond his office. Did he drink coffee or tea? Did he have a dog? Did he ever struggle the way I did? I told myself these thoughts were normal. But then came the dreams. Vivid, tangled dreams where he wasn't my therapist at all. Where we were in a bookstore, or a dimly lit bar, his hand brushing against mine as we laughed. Dreams where his neutrality melted away, and I saw him as a man, not a doctor. I woke up flushed and ashamed. This was dangerous. And yet, I wasn't sure I wanted it to stop. I arrived at therapy early. Too early. I lingered outside the building, pacing, before finally gathering the nerve to go in. Dr. Evans greeted me with his usual calm, but something about the way he looked at me today felt different. Or maybe I was imagining it. I think I need to stop therapy, I blurted. Surprise flickered across his features. May I ask why? I clenched my fists. Because this isn't working. I can't. I hesitated. I can't just keep talking about my feelings for you like there's something we can fix. His expression was unreadable. Laura, therapy isn't about fixing emotions. It's about understanding them. I shook my head. I understand them. I just don't think I can change them. Silence. Then, finally, he nodded. If that's what you feel is best. I waited for him to argue. To tell me I was making a mistake. But he didn't. And somehow that hurt the most. Leaving therapy wasn't supposed to feel like this. I'd expected a weight to lift, some sense of freedom from the unbearable tension that had built between Dr. Evans and me. Instead, I walked out of his office feeling untethered, as though I had severed the last thread holding me together. The city felt too loud, too crowded. I pulled my coat tighter around myself and moved through the streets in a daze, the cold evening air biting at my skin. I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to sit in my apartment and be alone with my thoughts. So I didn't. Instead, I wandered into a small, dimly lit cafe, ordered a black coffee, and found a corner seat by the window. I stared out at the passing pedestrians, my hands wrapped around the warmth of the cup, but I didn't drink. Had I done the right thing? Ending therapy had felt like taking control, like removing myself from a situation that had become more about longing than healing. But now, sitting here with nothing but silence pressing in around me, I felt lost. Yes. What if therapy wasn't just about Dr. Evans? What if I needed it, desperately? I took out my phone and hovered over my email, considering writing to him. But what would I even say? I made a mistake? I don't know how to do this without you? No. I wouldn't humiliate myself. I had made my choice. I took a deep breath, locked my phone, and forced myself to drink the lukewarm coffee. This was the beginning of something new. It had to be. Sleep became a battleground. The nightmares came back with a vengeance, waves of ink swallowing me whole, my fingers clawing at the surface as I sank deeper. My words, the ones I used to wield with ease, turned against me, wrapping around my throat, suffocating. I woke up gasping, sweat-soaked sheets twisted around my body. The familiar panic gripped me, my heartbeat frantic, my hands trembling as I reached for my phone. 3:12 a.m. I wanted to call him. I wanted to hear his voice, to have him guide me back from the edge of this terror. But he wasn't mine to call. Instead, I sat up, pressing my palms against my temples. The old ache in my chest was back, the same one I'd carried for years, before therapy, before Dr. Evans. This wasn't about him. It never had been. It was about the past. The things I hadn't dealt with. The man who had left. The failure I refused to acknowledge. I needed to write. I reached for my laptop, opened a blank document, and forced myself to type. The words felt stiff at first, unnatural. But I kept going. By sunrise, I had 5 pages. For the first time in months, I had written something. 1 week passed. Then 2. I avoided therapy like an ex-lover's name, unwilling to confront the urge to go back. I threw myself into writing instead, pouring every ounce of longing, frustration, and self-doubt onto the page. But it wasn't enough. Every evening, as I shut my laptop, I felt the emptiness creeping back in. The unfinished conversations, the unanswered questions. It wasn't just about my feelings for Dr. Evans. It was about the deeper wounds I had ignored, the abandonment, the loneliness, the relentless search for validation. And maybe I couldn't face those things alone. Maybe I didn't have to. I made the call. The receptionist put me on hold, the familiar piano melody playing in the background. My heart pounded in my ears. Then finally, his voice. "Laura." I swallowed hard. "Can I come back?" A pause. Then, a soft, measured response. "Of course." Returning to therapy felt like walking into a battlefield, knowing you might not survive the war. Dr. Evans greeted me with his usual professional calm, but I swore there was something else in his expression, a flicker of relief maybe. I sat, hands folded in my lap, my nerves raw. "I wasn't sure if you'd come back," he admitted. "Me neither." He nodded, waiting. I exhaled shakily. "I left because I thought I was fixing the problem. That if I removed you from my life, the feelings would go away." Dr. Evans leaned forward slightly, his attention unwavering. "Did they?" I let out a hollow laugh. "No. But I think I understand them better now." He remained silent, allowing me to fill the space. "It was never about you," I said finally. "It was about what you represented. Stability. Understanding. Something I never got from the people who were supposed to give it to me." He nodded, his voice gentle. "Transference often comes from unmet needs. From unresolved relationships. The mind finds a way to recreate them in safe spaces." Safe. That word sat heavily between us. "I think I used my feelings for you as a distraction," I admitted. It was easier to obsess over something unattainable than to face the real things I needed to deal with. He gave a small nod. "That's a significant realization." For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. Maybe I wasn't in love with Dr. Evans. Maybe I had just been searching for something I lost a long time ago. And maybe, just maybe, I was ready to find it within myself. The weeks passed, and therapy shifted. The tension eased. The sessions became about me again, not about him, not about unspoken desires or impossible fantasies. I started writing more, sleeping better. One evening, as I sat in my apartment, typing furiously at my keyboard, I realized something. I didn't feel trapped anymore. I didn't feel suffocated by my own thoughts. For the first time in years, I felt free. My feelings for Dr. Evans hadn't vanished overnight, but they had transformed into something else, understanding, gratitude. He had been a mirror, reflecting the things I hadn't been able to see in myself. And now, I was ready to step beyond the reflection. The next session, I smiled as I took my seat across from him. "I think I'm ready," I said. Dr. Evans tilted his head. "Ready for what?" "To finally let go." A small smile crossed his lips. "That's a big step, Laura." I nodded, exhaling.